This is, by far, the worst Resident Evil DLC I have ever played, the worst remake of a DLC I have ever played, and the worst DLC I have ever played in my entire life as a gamer. Hello everyone, welcome to my Separate Ways Remilk, Professional Difficulty, no damage, no nuking plus items, no charms, no merchant, Worstthrough. This will cover the entirety of this so-called DLC, even though this is nothing more than a ripoff, and it begins with a boss fight, if you want to call it that. It's average, but it's not even that amazing. It's just a damage race, because you have to make sure you defeat Pasanta very quickly before she has a chance to attack you, and that right there was a mistake. So I was supposed to have used the pistol on the hallucinations, and the third entity that appears is always going to be Pasanta. I should have then used the pistol on her head, hit her for a bit. If she teleported, or I ran out of pistol bullets, I would then use the grenade to knock her over, and then aim for the head by using the TMP, and that would finish her off. Yeah, it's a pretty dumb encounter, but it's a little bit better than the other encounters in this so-called DLC that is honestly worse than the main experience. Remember how I said that the main experience with Resident Evil 4 Remilk was a pre-alpha? This is a pre-pre-alpha, because they've somehow managed to make the experience feel even worse than the Remilk of Resident Evil 4 with the main experience. I cannot believe it, guys. Everything involving the story, characters, scenario designs, lore, and gameplay, it's all infinitely worse than the main experience. I just cannot believe they could do worse, but again, new Capcom just keeps on surprising me with their incompetency, setting that baseline so far below the normal baseline of incompetency, and it's why new Capcom is the worst development team I have ever seen, but I'll talk more about this when I get the chance. Right now, we have a stealth sequence, and I killed a guy right near the cannon because he's normally the biggest problem with this entire sequence. And I have no idea why Ada didn't do the hook shot melee just then. She should have done so, but for some reason on that ledge, she never chooses to do the melee attack, so that guy could have easily hit me. I did make some changes with my approaches to certain sections after I did this Worstthrough. So I replayed this DLC a couple of times, just doing it normally, improving my strategies. But you're not going to see any of it in this Worstthrough, unfortunately, and I was not willing to go through this Remilk again, trying to just get another recording for this no merchant Worstthrough, because again, the balancing in this DLC is infinitely worse than the main experience. But you kill the guy right near the cannon, and then you unlock the cannon by going down and destroying the counterweight, and then you use the cannon to finish off the rest of the enemies. And before you get up here, you're supposed to make sure you pick up the flash grenade. I didn't know at this point that there was a flash grenade that I could have picked up, so that was the first mistake I made in this first part of the Worstthrough. But either way, Chapter 1 is done, and now we're going to move on to Chapter 2. I'm not going to bother killing these guys, because these first two crossmen, they actually don't do anything. They're red herrings. They basically will just stand around and do nothing. This guy, however, he will attack you, and did you notice that right there? So, unlike the original version of the Separate Ways DLC, you do not get iframes when you initiate the hookshot, which is pretty stupid. I don't like that design at all. But I need to get rid of that guy because he's the one that will actually shoot. And then I'm going to use my sniper rifle to get rid of this guy. I'm also going to take the time to kill the brute that has the hammer. If you kill the brute with the hammer, he does not appear in the next area. So I'm going to make sure I pick up the supplies. And the enemies will spawn in when you get near the gate. And you will be able to use the barrel and also the explosive trap to your advantage to get rid of the brute. I do find it better to use only the explosive trap, not this explosive barrel right here. But of course, that's when I'm actually using the merchant. I don't know if that's still applicable if you aren't using the merchant. Not that I even care, because why would you ever want to play this badly balanced DLC with no merchant in mind? I mean, the only reason I did the no merchant thing was to set the baseline for the balancing, and it is really bad, guys. I just don't know what they were thinking, and as I predicted, because they balanced so much of this DLC around the merchant, the quality really rears its ugly head, and there's so much in terms of poor quality, in terms of the balancing, in terms of the gameplay designs, in terms of the poor hitboxes. It's a lot, guys, and again, I'll explain those when I get the chance, but now I'm just going to dispatch these guys with the pistol. If you are using the merchant, you can sell your pistol before you get to Pasanta's boss fight in Chapter 2, because the pistol is a pretty useless tool. The TMP more than suffices in taking the place of the pistol. But right here, I should have finished off the previous enemies and then trigger the next spawn, because right now the enemies are going to swarm me, and I'm gonna have a bit of a hassle trying to get past these guys. And yeah, lots of luck involved right here. But of course, if you're using the merchant, you can just get rid of all these guys. It's pretty simple to do. But we're just gonna move on right now, and there's gonna be a stealth sequence coming up. And you'll want to use the kitchen knife to dispatch 2 of the enemies, and then you'll want to use the sniper rifle to kill 2 enemies in 1 bullet, and then you'll want to use the explosive barrels to finish off the rest of the enemies, and that's how the sequence will go. So once that guy's dead, hop through this window right over here, perform a sneak kill on this enemy right over here, and then you'll want to wait until the shot is lined up perfectly to get rid of these 2 enemies. And depending on the speed of these next 2 enemies, you can either get one of them or both of them through the door. But it shouldn't matter too much. But this one, I get both of them, so I'm able to finish both of them off with the explosive barrel, and I get rid of the other guy with the barrel. I pick up the rest of the stuff. I'm going to use the sniper rifle to get rid of this crossbow lady, and if I can get to this hook shot point fast, I won't have to deal with these guys. It's random the speed they recover from that drop-down animation, but I'm going to kick that guy. I'm going to pick up some supplies here. This platform coming up, that seems like it's going to break. It does break, but it's not actually affected by your speed, so you can just sprint across this platform. You do not have to walk across it like what you're going to see right over here. Then you're going to want to use your sniper rifle to dispatch the crossbow lady, and then you'll be able to get to the church, and it's all pretty simple from there. And then we have Pisanta's so-called encounter. So I guess I'll talk about Pisanta's encounter. It's a really stupid encounter, so this DLC, for some reason, decides to up the ante on the fantastical aspects of the Plaga now. I mean, Resident Evil 4 Remilk already made the Plagas bad enough as they were, with the stupid fantasy aspects, hallucinations, the hive mind. Now they've just done it even worse, because for some reason, Pisanta, she somehow infected Ada through a pustule that fired acid at her, and somehow she was embedded with a Plaga. I don't understand. That just doesn't make any sense. But whenever Ada is near Pisanta, for some reason hallucinations appear, and that's what this encounter is. So you're going to be fighting Pisanta as well as her hallucinations, and you can deal with the hallucinations in one of 2 ways. You can parry them, and for some reason when you parry the hallucinations, they drain your knife durability, which is so retarded. I don't know what is wrong with these developers, but how the hell does using a real-world object like a knife and parrying hallucinations drain durability? Have these developers completely misunderstood the difference between the real world and a fantasy or hallucination? Why the hell do you lose durability when you parry the hallucinations? It doesn't make any sense, guys. Like, I could understand the whole idea of parrying the hallucinations, and if they didn't drain durability, I would be kinda okay with it, but it would still not remove any of the issues already apparent with this stupid encounter, because the environment is badly set up. Pisanta has so much life, and there's so many moments where Pisanta and the hallucinations can group together in such a way that it's impossible to get away. And when they teleport, it becomes even more problematic because they can push you into walls, they can do all sorts of dumb things. But in this second phase, Pisanta is accompanied by 1 hallucination. So the one that's real is the one where you can hear the footstep noises, and it's the one whose eyes always glow red when they attack. So that's the real one. And also, the hallucinations can only do 1 attack, which is just a close-range strike attack, like what Pisanta's doing right now. But if you parry them, you'll make them go away for about 5 seconds before they reappear. You can actually get rid of them permanently by just shooting them a bunch, but it takes so much ammunition. Even when you're using the merchant, it still takes way too much ammunition. It doesn't make any sense, guys. But these hallucinations, Ether says they have like 50% of the real Pisanta's HP, but it's still quite a lot. If you go for headshots, headshots actually matter with the hallucinations, and also when you're dealing with the real Pisanta. And you can shoot through the hallucinations to damage Pisanta if they're between yourself and her. But right now, I'm not trying to use the parry because I need to preserve my knife durability, and be careful of that attack right there. That attack has some really bad hit detection because it has phantom range. A lot of the moves are so badly designed in this DLC because they want you to use the parry, but of course I can't use the parry because I'll be wasting knife durability. But even then, why do you make the hitboxes bad to encourage the player to use the parry system? Resident Evil 6 did not need to make the hitboxes bad with phantom range to get people to use the counter system. What is wrong with the developers? Where is the justification involved for making the hitboxes this bad? It doesn't make any sense. But right here, I'm going to use the parry system, and as you can see, even though these are full-blown hallucinations, I'm losing knife durability for no reason. It doesn't make any sense, guys. It just doesn't make any fucking sense. But You see right there, that's another dumb situation. So Pasanta can do an attack, and then another hallucination can do an attack at just the right moment where you do the parry on the real Pasanta, and then you get hit at the end. That's really dumb. Oh, and also right there, that knife execution, do not use the hook shot to close in for the knife execution, because if you do, you will lose knife durability. If you do not use the hook shot and you go for the knife execution, you don't lose durability. It's a really stupid system. I don't know how new Capcom made this kind of blunder in the programming, where doing the hook shot knife execution drains durability, whereas doing the regular knife execution doesn't drain durability. It's just one of the great examples of how retarded the developers were when programming the stupid DLC, if you want to call it that, because again, this is a pre-alpha that feels so unfinished and everything. It's really stupid, guys, but we're now on Chapter 3. We have the chance to pick up some supplies. There are no boss fights right now, but there are going to be a lot of damage spongy encounters. And then we have the El Gigante at the end of this chapter, and it's not even a fight, but I'll talk more about this when I get the chance. Right now, we need to flee from Vitoris Mendez. And for some reason, even though he was very keen on choking out Leon, when he grabs onto Ada, he just throws her away for no reason. That is a bad movie villain design right there. I don't know what the hell they were thinking with that. That just looks really stupid. If you want to see a lot of my reactions to the poor writing, the poor screenplay, the poor story moments, just check out my blind playthrough. But right here, I should have used a grenade, because these two enemies are a pain in the ass. Their pathing is completely random. And that guy on the left, if he sprints into you, he will knock you over, and then he'll most likely grab you. Or you could have them initiating the grab animation very early. But to mitigate that, you should just use a grenade to knock over the guy on the left. The guy on the right is very delayed. But we have a stealth sequence, and once again, new Capcom is going to display how incompetent they are as a developer, because you have to make sure that this guy stands up by walking into him, because if you decide to stealth kill him when he's crouched like that, Ada will do a combat execution and she will drain more durability than usual. I do not understand why new Capcom is that incompetent that they can't even program a correct stealth execution animation when enemies are crouched like that. So to accommodate for this, you have to walk into the guy, get him to stand up, and then you'll be able to do the regular stealth kill attack. It's so stupid. But right here, one of the guys has Leon's jacket, and if you sell Leon's jacket at the merchant, you will get spinels. But of course, I'm not using the merchant here, but you get 7 spinels for selling Leon's jacket, and that's something I've noticed. A lot of the merchant requests in this DLC, they give you more spinels than usual compared to the main experience, which is definitely an indication that they want you to use the merchant like crazy. But then they have that no merchant challenge, which I'm guessing they want you to do on like New Game Plus, but even then, the fact that they balance this entire DLC around the merchant just goes to show that they wanted to contribute to half-ass work. They contributed no effort whatsoever to the enemy HP, to the ammunition, to the bad hitboxes, nothing like that. It's all just like a pay-to-win system. That's just how much the merchant feels forced upon you in this stupid DLC. And it doesn't change anything. Even using the merchant, the fights are still stale and repetitive and so formulaic and so garbage and so badly designed. Just like the main experience, there's nothing like methodical or interesting or unique about the way you approach these bosses. It's still the same damage spongy, use all your ammunition at your heart's content, just try to aim for the head and you'll get like a minuscule increase in damage, all this other stupid stuff. It still doesn't change anything whatsoever. This is the most soulless DLC I have ever played in a Resident Evil title, and Shadows of Rose from Resident Evil Village is miles better than this piece of shit DLC. At least Shadows of Rose had some positive moments with its story, and also with the way they did Evelyn, even though there were problems with Evelyn as well. But as I acknowledge in my retrospective of the Shadows of Rose DLC, there were some positives to definitely take away, but there are no positives to take away with this stupid DLC. And again, all the reactions I had to the poor story moments, the poor character portrayals, everything involving the gameplay, you can check out my blind playthrough for that. It's a lot easier to see that than have me just discuss all that in a walkthrough / worst through. But you can get the blast crossbow right over here, and I think I use a flash grenade right over here. No, I don't actually use a flash grenade. So I'm instead going to lure the enemies over to a mantle position, but it's a bit awkward right here. I didn't really plan this through, so I nearly died right over here. But I'm going to essentially lure the enemies over to this mantle spot right over here. and because they're delayed, I have plenty of time to turn the valve, disable the steam, and get out of there. If you are playing this normally, you can just lure the male chainsaw guy over to the valve, and then use a flash grenade to stun him and the Bella sister. And the other enemies, if they try to come through the door and they don't get stunned by the flash grenade, they'll get stunned by the chainsaw lady, because again, when chainsaw guys are stunned, their chainsaw has a hitbox on it for some reason, and it's really dumb, but at least it works to your advantage in this part. So right here, I'm going to try to stun this guy and then use the hookshot melee to bypass this enemy right over here. There's probably a better way to do this, but that's just the method I decided to go for. I'm just going to make a save right over here, and I'm going to run past these guys after I restart the checkpoint. I shouldn't have taken this path. I should have just restarted the checkpoint and then taken the leftmost path and then gone up the ladder right over here so that I can get past these guys. But I instead alert the enemies, and they're going to come after me, which was a big mistake. So now I'm just going to run. There are going to be 2 enemies that come out of these doors right over here. These enemies, as well as the previous enemies, will follow you through this door, and they'll follow you all the way to the typewriter right over here. But of course, because I make the save and I restart the checkpoint, they'll just go back to where they were originally, and I won't have to deal with them. And it's good you go into that typewriter room, because there are additional supplies you can get, like blast crossbow bolts, some submachine gun ammo, and for some reason you get shotgun shells, but this DLC, for some stupid reason, decides to lock the shotgun behind the merchant, and I do not understand why, because the shotgun is such a fundamental weapon in all the Resident Evil titles, and the way this DLC has designed the enemy encounters, the shotgun just feels befitting for those kind of situations when you're dealing with so many of the enemies, but to lock it behind the merchant just goes to show how much they do not understand their own fundamental gameplay designs. Oh, and also, something I should mention about professional difficulty in this DLC, the changes from hardcore difficulty are a lot more noticeable. Like, you will find more enemies than usual on professional difficulty compared to hardcore difficulty. Like, you will find more enemies in this sequence right over here, so you have to take out the enemies before you engage the El Gigante, because they can be a real nuisance. So that's what I'm going to focus on primarily, just getting rid of the enemies. And I do not understand the need to provide this number of enemies. How did they even get control of an El Gigante? Where did this guy even come from? Because as I recall in that file that you get from the first El Gigante fight in Resident Evil 4 Remilk, the El Gigante was uncontrollable, and so members of the castle had to come in, use an incantation, whatever the hell that means, to put this guy to sleep. And now all of a sudden they have complete control over this El Gigante. And this guy, he doesn't try to kill the Ganado for some weird reason. Oh, maybe it's the hive mind. I don't even know, guys. Like, if the plot guy has some kind of hive mind, then theoretically it should be possible to control this guy, but it was apparently impossible to do so with the first El Gigante, so they had to get guys from the castle to help them out, and like the story just goes all over the place. Like, they just do away with so many elements of the lore, and they change the lore when it best suits them, and that's why we have this encounter right here for some weird reason. And this El Gigante is a lot bigger than the first El Gigante you fight in Resident Evil 4 Remilk. And he also has this unusually slow motion effect tied to him. Like, he is so unnaturally slow, and it doesn't make any sense. It just looks really weird. It's almost like the adaptive difficulty is just being applied for no reason. But the reason why he's this slow is because he has so much life. He has way more life than the first time you encounter him in Resident Evil 4 Remilk. It's really stupid. Like, I didn't even feel like I was fighting a boss. That's how it was on my blind playthrough, guys. You should check out that part. It was really stupid. Like, I just don't understand what the hell I was doing with this encounter. Because this encounter certainly wasn't a fight, that's for sure. But I believe these are the last couple of enemies, and this El Gigante also has the ability to throw rocks at you, like that El Gigante could in Chapter 8 of Resident Evil 4 Remilk. The spread on the rocks is very, very weird. It randomizes every time. So even when you're running to the left or to the right, and you'll want to primarily run to the right to avoid those rocks, you can still get hit randomly, but I often try to minimize the chances of that by crouching at the right moment. And even when the rocks look like they're going to hit you, like they just pass right through you, you don't get hit. And then other times you do get hit by nothing. It's just really ambiguous detection on these rocks. That's why it's always best to crouch at the end. But I've killed that guy, and now I need to deal with this last guy right over here. I had a really stupid moment in one of my recordings where the El Gigante, he hits a guy, his arm is completely torn off, and you'd think with a big guy like the El Gigante, he would kill the enemies instantly. He doesn't. But this guy, his arm was completely gone, and he just ran towards me, right? He was in the middle of a sprint animation. I fired a sniper rifle round at him, and when the enemies run, they're supposed to be stunned, but the guy wasn't stunned. He just ran right through my sniper rifle shot and just punched me. It was really stupid. That is just how artificial the capabilities of the enemies are, and it just doesn't make any sense. But I've finally gotten rid of all the enemies, and he's throwing rocks again. Somehow I avoid this. I have no idea how I avoided that. Like I said, the spread on the rocks is really weird, and the actual modeling on the rocks is not very honest. Like, that literally looked like it went right through me, and I know I said to crouch, which I did, but it still looked like that went right through me. It just doesn't make any sense. Like, and that was on an incline, too. Like, there's just a lot of ambiguity here, and this guy's just gonna be walking around, and at least his attacks are slow enough that you can get past them, but when you're trying to run under him, be very careful of some really shitty hitboxes. Like, the kick that he does, he can actually hit you with that kick before the animation has even begun. And you want to see what I mean, check out my blind playthrough. It's the little kick that he does when he's walking towards you, and then when you're close to him, he does that kick. If you try to run underneath him, and you're kind of hugging the incorrect side, you just get hit by the attack before it even happens. It's really dumb. But that right there was kind of interesting. So I somehow managed to stay on top of that building, and then when I jumped off, he angled his attack differently, and he missed the building. I do wonder if there's some kind of looping tech with that, but I doubt it's going to be that reliable anyway. Not that it even matters, because it's just clear that they balance this DLC so poorly that they just want you to use the merchant, and I know someone's going to say, oh, you're meant to use the merchant. Oh, if you use the merchant, the fight's automatically better. No, it's still the same encounter. You're using the same methodology. You're still dealing with the same formulaic nature to this guy, the same stupid hitboxes, other dumb things as well. The merchant doesn't change any of that. This is still just so rudimentary. I don't even feel like I'm doing a fight right now. It's this soulless, this unbelievable in its underwhelming nature. I just do not understand what they were thinking, and this is why I'm saying that the merchant should not be used to influence the natural flow of gameplay. I already talked about this in my Resident Evil Village retrospective, but by designing your experience around some kind of paywall system like the merchant, or like the Duke from Resident Evil Village, the developers are devoting less time to refining the fundamental mechanics, to refining the hitboxes, to refining the enemy engagements, and just bloating the enemy HP to an absurd degree to allow them to do less work, because they try to give the impression that giving the enemies so much life somehow equates to difficulty, yet they just strip down everything else. I've honestly never seen Resident Evil content this bare bones and so uninteresting, and I remember a lot of the reviews of this DLC saying that the fights were varied and the enemy engagements were actually a lot of fun. What the hell were they playing, guys? I don't understand. How the hell is anything that I'm doing any different to what I was doing in Resident Evil 4 Remilk? And this kind of design right here with just running away and just shooting his weak spot and bypassing really bad hitboxes and the like, and all these other dumb moves. It's what I'm doing for the other bosses as well, and they're just as much of a damage sponge as this guy. Only you three and Sadler take way more punishment than this guy. It's honestly ridiculous, guys. I don't know what the hell they were thinking. They just got so lazy, and as I acknowledged in that video where I showcased you three just walking in a circle because of how dumb his AI is, it really feels like this DLC was designed by a bunch of people who felt very burned out by the work they were doing, because the workplace culture in the gaming industry is a very toxic work environment, and it's even more toxic outside of the United States. But getting back on track, it really feels like the development team that handled this were a bunch of people who felt so pressured by the higher-ups, who felt so burned out with the work they were doing, who probably had to put in a lot of crunch time, and because of that, it impacted their investment into this DLC, and so the quality really suffers because of this. It really does feel like they just didn't have any sense of passion, any sense of understanding with how the characters were, with how the gameplay's meant to be, and so they favored the most rudimentary model possible, and they just designed this DLC around the merchant, and so it's just meant to speed everything up so that you don't see just how limited in quality the encounters are. It's just really fucking stupid, guys, and he's finally dead after all that punishment. It's so dumb. But now we have a bit of a breather to get back some supplies. You can even tell that they designed that El Gigante to be a bullet sponge because they give you back quite a lot of ammunition at the start of Chapter 4. So they clearly knew they did a shit job with the El Gigante, so that's why they give you back a lot of ammunition at the start of the Chapter 4. This ammunition is needed for U3 and Sadler because they take an absurd amount of punishment. And I've already uploaded the video of me doing U3 without using the Merchant and playing on professional difficulty. It just took so long to do. It was almost 20 minutes. It's absolutely astounding that they think that is acceptable for bosses to be like that. And regardless of whether I use the Merchant or not, it's still the same encounter, just avoiding the same stupid moves. Nothing I do is any different aside from the damage I'm doing. That's just how basic the boss designs are in this DLC. And you know another thing that's really stupid? The amount of scenarios that were originally in the original version of Resident Evil 4 now being put into this DLC, because we're actually going to be doing scenarios that were clearly from the original version of Resident Evil 4, but we have to pay for that now because you have to pay $10 to buy this DLC. What an absolute ripoff. So we're paying money to go through these reused scenarios that for some reason didn't make it into the main pre-alpha Resident Evil 4 Remilk. How the hell is that content? And even though they have new areas in the Separate Ways DLC that you didn't go to in the original version of the Separate Ways DLC, the way they use the areas is so badly handled. Doesn't matter how aesthetically pleasing the new areas are, if the content within them is as substandard as it is, it's automatically not going to be a good area. But right now, we're doing a section with the Maduros. Coming up is going to be a really stupid combat encounter in a very confined space, and there are a bunch of Maduros and also a bunch of crossbow guys as well. But you have to pretty much game the system, and you have to eliminate the Maduros in a very specific way to ensure that the crossbow guys don't overwhelm you, because trying to shoot them through the bars is a pain in the ass. And if you pick up the silver bottle before starting this, you can close the doors, and you know they are pushed back a bit, but they can still shoot you through the doors, which is stupid. They should not be able to shoot you through the doors. What's the whole point of giving the player the ability to pick up that silver bottle if you can't even stop them from shooting through the doors? So dumb. But the TMP is really good against the Maduros. You have to make sure that the Maduros are in a neutral state so that they actually get stunned by the TMP. And if you shoot them in the armor, if you shoot them in the head, you can stun them after a couple of shots so long as they are within a neutral state. They also seem to get stunned faster if you hit them during an attack animation. That's what I've noticed a couple of times with this enemy. And also, you do have the ability to stab them, but you'll want to use your combat knife, but I don't recommend doing so if you're doing this kind of restriction. But you shouldn't be doing this kind of restriction anyway, because it's very clear it's not designed very well with this DLC. But if you use your regular combat knife, you can kill these enemies instantly when you floor them, so long as their parasite is exposed. And also, you want to make sure you kill the first two Maduros at the same time, because you do not want to be put into a situation where you kill one Madura, the crossbow guys spawn, and they're busy shooting you while you're dealing with the one guy. But when you kill them at the same time, the guys will spawn, and you'll be able to retreat to the middle part of this gate right over here. So standing right here, the crossbow guys cannot hit me. So I'm just going to make sure that I get rid of this guy. These guys do take a bit more of a beating, because my TMP is obviously not upgraded, but the TMP is just a lot better than the pistol when it comes to stunning these guys, and he's not being stunned right now because he's not in a neutral state. He gets stunned. I really hate that flinch animation, and it's just a really dumb-looking flinch animation of them stumbling such a distance. But there we go. I'm going to expose that parasite, and then I'm going to use the hook shot to expose this guy's parasite, and then I'm going to hide around this corner right over here, use the flash grenade to get rid of the two parasites, and there's just one Amador left, and by hiding back here, the crossbow guys cannot hit me. So I'm going to wait until the Amadura comes around the corner. I'm going to stun him, and I'm going to kick him. The parasite is exposed, so I'm not going to waste the flash grenade. It is imperative that you save up on a lot of flash grenades, because the stupid sequence involving the Garradors returns from Chapter 10 of Resident Evil 4 Remilk, and on hardcore difficulty, you only dealt with one Garrador, but on professional difficulty, you deal with two Garradors. What the hell were they thinking right there? And I have saved so many clips just showcasing how badly designed that entire sequence is if you do not damage race it, or just spam flash grenades like crazy. And you can use the bowgun in order to silently dispatch enemies, and because the bolts create an explosion, the Garradors can hone in on the explosion, and you can kind of control them that way, but it's very buggy, because I have had times where even when I'm firing the bowgun and I use the explosives to my advantage, for some reason, the Garradors omnisciently know where I am, and they sprint towards me, and they just melee me. So broken. So I see new Capcom clearly has no understanding of how they program the Gyarados, as I'm expecting from the most incompetent development team ever. And speaking of incompetent designs, we now have this stupid sequence. This part is clinically broken. So you'll want to make sure that you jump to this side and then use the grenade to knock this red zealot into the wall so that he goes into that context-sensitive stun animation and you can just stab him. That's right, guys. I'm going to actually use a mechanic that they never talk about in Resident Evil 4 Remilk, and it has very spotty detection, but every time I've done it this way, it's always had pretty good detection. But that's not the part that's clinically broken. So do you notice how the red zealot is running away? Well, he has to go to stationary spots to do his summoning move. And believe it or not, guys, when he's in the middle of running between stationary summoning points, you cannot stun him with flash grenades and normal grenades. It is clinically broken. And I have footage of this that I'm going to showcase in my Separate Ways Remilk Poor Design series. And you want to know another stupid thing? This guy can survive 3 knife executions. 3 knife executions, guys. And once again, just like in the main experience of Resident Evil 4 Remilk, even though this red zealot is literally a normal Ganado, he gets all these properties that don't make any sense. He's resilient to being stunned for no reason. This guy is more resilient to stuns than the brutes are. It doesn't make any sense. It's so retarded. It is so artificial. It's clearly just very lazy designs right there because they had to create some idea of false challenge, and so they decided to give an enemy that should be theoretically as physically fit as these guys in terms of the way they respond to stuns, but no. It's completely artificial, and he's just able to resist stuns and make this gameplay even more awkward than it needs to be. Again, I will be showcasing those kind of awkward gameplay moments in my Poor Designs of Separate Ways Remilk series. But I know people are just going to be like, oh, it's not awkward, you're meant to damage race him, but that only further validates just how much they designed this around mindlessly slotting into upgrades, and the fact that they disable his stuns, and it's like, I mean, it's like a bug for crying out loud. But this DLC wears those poor designs like they're medals and treats them like they're intended design choices. There's no reason for this guy to be resilient to flash grenades and normal grenades when he's running between stationary summoning points. And he should not be taking 3 knife executions to go down, and he's still alive afterwards. Like, you have to pump in so many shots with your TMP after that 3rd knife execution. That is ridiculous. And the sniper rifle doesn't help. And look at this. Based on the principle of common sense, he should have been knocked into the wall to his right, but instead he does some other kind of flinch animation that doesn't make sense, and so I miss out on the opportunity to punish him with a knife execution because of really clunky animation designs right there. Yeah, great design, new Capcom. I hope you revel in your poor designs. I hope you guys revel in this kind of design philosophy with your future titles, and just showcase just how incompetent a development team you are, far below the baseline level of incompetency. And right now, I'm just trying to see if maybe the stun systems are kind of working on this guy, but it's just not working, and I unfortunately get in his way. I did not expect him to go down that path right there, but he gets right over there. I'm going to be able to knock him into this wall, and then I'm going to do the knife execution. And you might as well just use some bowgun bolts on him. I tried to use the sniper rifle on him, and I'm trying to make sure I hit his head properly, but I really thought that would kill him. I really did, but he's still alive for no reason, and that's the 3rd knife execution. It just doesn't make any sense. Why is he this resilient? It doesn't make sense. This is so lazy, guys. This is just so clinically retarded. It's like a comedy with them at this point. This is so silly for all the wrong reasons. I just cannot believe they opted for this as content. The maze sequence in the Separate Ways DLC for the original version of Resident Evil 4 was never this stupid. You just deal with a couple of zealots and you're on your way. And the red zealots in Resident Evil 4 OG were just like the regular zealots. There was nothing different about them aside from their attire, because they were red, of course, and somehow I avoided that hitbox just then. Normally that has phantom range, but somehow I didn't get hit by that. Really doesn't make any sense. But the red zealots in Resident Evil 4 OG actually made sense with their capabilities, but no. Apparently common sense and the physical traits of enemies, just at face value, doesn't apply whatsoever to how they're interpreted in the gameplay, in new Capcom's eyes. It's so retarded. But right there, stealth kill the guy, and then use that trap right there to your advantage to get rid of these 2 guys. And there's an elegant crown in that box right there, and that can be very helpful to build up enough pesetas in order to gain access to a rocket launcher. And this DLC is so badly balanced that in a general, like, normal playthrough of Separate Ways Remilk, I use 2 rocket launchers. 2 rocket launchers, guys. I use 1 rocket launcher for the first phase of U3, and I use another rocket launcher for Sadler. There is no reason to pay these bosses any respect, because they just take such an absurd amount of punishment and have so many bad hitboxes. But now we have the reused sewer section from the original version of Resident Evil 4, only nowhere near as interesting, as fast-paced, or anything like that. It's just a very slow, very boring section, just dealing with enemies one at a time. And here's a shield guy. I always just bait out an attack and just run past him. And be very careful right here. This guy is actually going to be able to move during the cutscene that plays, which shows the water being drained. So when you skip this cutscene, you've got to move very quickly, because he will move during that entire moment. I think that's the only instance of enemies moving during the cutscene, so that's really stupid that that is the case. And now we have Navisidors right over here. And for some reason, they take a greater beating compared to the previous Navisidors, but they generally die in about 1 or 2 shots to the head with the sniper rifle, sometimes 3 because of how sporadic and drunk the enemy HP system is. But there's a Navisidor right over there, and then there's a guy with Scythe. He will always transform into a Plaga-type Godania whenever you kill him, so there's no real reason to deal with him. I mean, what you can do is retreat back to a tether point and then just sneak kill him. Or if you just knock him on the ground, just use your knife on him. But of course, I don't want to waste knife durability, and that right there was very unfortunate. He did the wrong animation, because sometimes when you deplete the stun HP to 0, they just get knocked down to the ground like that, and that is just not good, because the ground knife execution takes off way more durability than doing the knife execution on kneeling enemies when you're behind them. I don't know why the durability on your knife varies with your attacks. It doesn't make any sense. Like, doing the regular back knife execution takes off more durability than using it against kneeling enemies. I mean, why does it vary like that? It just doesn't make any sense. But I deal with him, and there are still a couple of Navisidor in the water right now, so there's 2 of them, and I'm going to be able to continually knock them over using the TMP. I'm trying to save up on a lot of rifle ammo because I need a lot of rifle ammo for Sadler, and believe me when I say you do need an absurd amount. I had like 100 sniper rifle rounds, and I killed Sadler in almost like 75 sniper rifle rounds. 75 sniper rifle rounds. Why is his HP that bloated? It doesn't make sense. Like, seriously, why does Sadler even need to transform if he's this resilient to your shots? It doesn't make sense. But there is still more I need to say about that stupid encounter when I get to them. But of course, we have the stupid Garrador encounter. This encounter is clinically broken, just like the Chapter 10 encounter. And unfortunately, the sniper rifle just isn't as good as the assault rifle from Chapter 10, the Resident Evil 4 Remilk. So I won't be able to deal a lot of high damage to the Garradors when they're busy being stunned by the flash grenade. Well, also, this wall that they're attached to, this wall is very broken, because the enemies can actually hit you through the geometry. They can hit you through that wall that the Garradors are attached to. And the Garradors get off the wall when you shoot them, or when you kill at least 3 enemies initially. And after the 3rd enemy, a Plaga-type Aranya will spawn, so you need to get rid of it very quickly before the Garradors are active. And this guy hears me, so I'm going to shoot him, and I'm going to use a flash grenade to damage his parasite. I'm going to expose the parasite again. I'm going to use another flash grenade, and I can probably pump in some additional shots to destroy this parasite, but that fails because the damage was calculated very differently, and so I have to kill this guy, and now we have to deal with this guy, and unfortunately, because his parasite wasn't exposed, he didn't take a lot of damage from the flash grenade. I don't know if Garradors can actually take damage from the flash grenades if their parasites aren't exposed. Like, maybe they are taking damage, but the damage is just very little. I've never really understood that. I'd have to ask Ether to verify that for me with the speedrun tool. But now enemies are spawning, but they do come in shorter amounts. I think after I kill this guy, more enemies will spawn. This Garrador is having trouble getting rid of the enemies. Just more awkward gameplay, just pushing the enemies around, not even instantly killing them. Looks really stupid and just makes the gameplay that much more awkward. There's all sorts of awkward gameplay that I've saved in my poor designs of Separate Ways of Remilk. And that right there, I use the crossbow bolt to generate noise and kill that guy right there. And then there should be 1 guy left, I believe, or there's going to be more enemies that spawn after I kill this guy. I don't remember. I do know that there aren't as many enemies that spawn compared to the Chapter 10 encounter with the Garradors, and I was very fortunate right there that he wasn't sprinting towards me. I have no idea why. But I see another enemy has spawned in, and there's a Plaga-type Aranya, so there are 2 of these guys, and they will try to attach to the Ganado right over here, and it's often a benefit to have a Placa Temporánea attached to a Ganado because they're constantly in a sprint animation and they have no kind of hesitation running towards you. So because they're sprinting, it means that the shot I deal to them is going to stun them, and hopefully it will cause the Gyarados to deal with the Ganado. Not right there. I don't know why he skipped the Ganado. He collided with it, so he should have prioritized him, but he locked onto my sound for some reason. That's not how that's supposed to work. Yeah, all sorts of really weird programming like that, all sorts of buggy AI moments, and unfortunately he knocked over the Ganado. Yeah, you can't really appreciate the lethality of these enemies when they can't even kill regular Ganado in one hit, and it's just making the gameplay awkward. They're pushing them around, all sorts of dumb things. And you want to know something else that's really stupid about this sequence compared to Chapter 10? The enemies can run. In Chapter 10, the enemies, for the most part, spent more time walking than running, and that was kind of complementary to the Gyarados designs, even though it was still a very buggy encounter. But in this sequence, there aren't any enemies that walk. They all run, and so it doesn't complement the fact that you have to walk to avoid the Gyarados. And it's just really stupid how the Gyarados are supposed to not have any kind of understanding of friend or foe, and yet they still lock onto your sounds because they're that badly programmed of an enemy type, and so they ignore all the chanting that the Ganados are doing, all the throws, all the running that they're doing, like, all those kind of sounds that they're generating, and they just hone in on your sound somehow. It's really stupid, but he's finally dead after those pistol shots, and now we are coming upon our very first extreme damage spongy boss, which is U3. And this is a shit fight. Every phase of U3 is terrible. There are two phases. So there's the main body phase, and then there's the worm phase, or whatever the hell this tail is. I can't tell if this is meant to be a Plaga. Is this some kind of mutated centipede? Is this some worm? And why does U3 even undergo such a massive transformation after being hit by that catwalk that Ada dropped on him? That shouldn't be enough to trigger this kind of mutation. It really doesn't make any sense, guys. And U3 has a lot of dumb attacks. The acid attacks are the worst. But this right here, generally when he's close to you, he likes to shoot the acid in front of you rather than at you. But if you're far away, U3 will like to shoot acid at you, and that move is the most bullshit attack he has. And then his other attacks have some really bad hitboxes to them, and I've already shown a couple of the bad hitboxes with U3 in my bad hitbox video, and there are also some awkward gameplay moments that I'm reserving for future content. But U3 just has way too much life, and there are a lot of QTEs that you gotta bear in mind. There's a lot of moments where his AI can have a lot of trouble navigating the environment. And if you're standing near the edge of the arena, the acid attack that he does when she's firing it at you, she can change her trajectory, and it'll almost always hit you every single time, even when you do the same methodology of running to the left or right at the right moment. And in my dodge/avoiding U3's attacks video, I demonstrated that you can strafe to the side if you have your knife out and just kind of turn as you're moving to the left or right. But it's not very practical when you have your guns out, because for some reason Ada's movement is just very different when you have your knife out compared to using the guns. But that's one dumb attack that U3 has, and then the other attacks involving the QTEs. Sometimes you can press the QTE and the QTE doesn't register for some reason, and sometimes she can get phantom range on your QTE attacks, and I have footage of this happening in my hitbox video. There's all sorts of problems with that, and U3 has way too much life. And I'm pumping in a lot of headshots with the sniper rifle, and it's still not enough. But you'll just want to pump in all of your bowgun bolts into U3 as well as your explosives. There's really no reason to stay up on a lot of bowgun bolts for the later chapters, because you do get a lot of bowgun bolts back anyway. Not a lot, just a couple, but it's still enough to be substantial. And U3 at least gets stunned by the crossbow bolts. Sadler does not get stunned by explosives whatsoever. He doesn't really get stunned by anything, which is really stupid. I mean, he does get stunned by flash grenades, but they can be inconsistent at times. Yeah, that's really how you want to open up Phase 1. There's no reason to save bowgun bolts for Phase 2. And I actually discovered that using your knife, as well as a couple of boot knives, you can get U3's worm done. But you do need a weapon like the TMP to dispatch the Navisadors, and the second phase of U3 has a lot more bullshit attacks, I would say, because the amount of times U3 does that acid attack, and it's random whether she actually hits you or not when she comes out of the ground, or sorry, the worm comes out of the ground, or the number of times that worm just comes out of the ground right next to me, and it does the acid attack, and I'm unable to avoid it. It's really bullshit. Why is that worm able to do a long-range attack at close range? It's physically impossible to avoid it. There is a lot of RNG with U3, and that coupled with the bullet spongy nature and the bad hitboxes, everything like that, U3 is a fucking disgrace of a boss. U3 from the original Resident Evil 4 was fun. U3 was designed for knife only, and it was designed as such to allow you to save up on your ammunition for the later encounters, because the later sequences definitely demanded a lot of ammo, but not to an absurd degree like Resident Evil 4 Remilk or the Separate Ways Remilk content. And I know some moron commented on my video on U3, and he made the obligatory, oh, you just think it's too hard or something, or it's supposed to have a lot of life, it's meant to be challenging. Really? You seriously think damage spongy bosses, bad hitboxes, improperly designed environments that don't complement the AI system put in place with U3, having to do 2 fights in a row on the same checkpoint, and repeating the same tedious process of looping this guy's attacks and just like avoiding them accordingly, and it really becomes stale and repetitive and so mind-numbingly boring because this is what we've been doing for every single boss in Separate Ways. How does that equate with the idea of challenge in this moron's mind? I'm so glad that guy left that comment because I'm going to go into a lot of detail about that comment when I do my retrospective. That's precisely why I keep a lot of these idiots' comments around, because they help inform better arguments, they help strengthen the foundations I'm going to lay out, criticizing the objective issues with Separate Ways Remilk, and just really breaking apart the poor foundations that these really pitiful arguments are based on. All this other kind of stuff, it's just there to help people by retrospective for sure. That's why I keep those dumb comments around. But there is literally nothing to really say about U3, honestly. Just try to keep your distance. I mean, you can stay at mid-range in relation to U3 to stop U3 from doing the acid attack, but it's just very awkward to do so, and you run the risk of getting screwed by a bad hitbox or a really dumb QTE, or just out of the blue, U3 is just not doing anything, and then she just walks into you and does that slash that you have to parry, all this other dumb stuff. Like, it just really feels awkward doing that, and also, it just feels like really dumb justification to limit a boss's movesets because of how badly designed the move is. Like, I have to deal with that move somehow. I can't just avoid it. I have to really showcase how awkward it is trying to avoid that kind of stupid acid attack. That's why I don't do it. And staying at mid-range is just as awkward as just trying to approach U3 normally. Like, that boss is so badly designed. And now we have the second phase, which is the stupid worm encounter. So this is even longer than the first phase, because this worm has more life than usual, but it can die after 2 knife executions. The second knife execution will always kill it regardless of its HP. But what I do is I stand in the middle of this arena, and I just pay attention. Whenever the QTE appears, there's no kind of warning that it's about to occur. There's no kind of vibrations in the ground or anything. It just appears out of nowhere. And I cannot begin to tell you how many times I nearly succumbed to fatigue, or I just felt very tired with how long this fight was dragging out, and I nearly blanked out on the QTEs a couple of times. Just without that warning system. It's so dumb that they would design it like that. But if you stand in the middle, you generally get this worm to be at a distance relative to you, and then you can avoid the moves accordingly. But some of the moves have really bad hitboxes, like the acid attack. And also, the charge attack that this worm does, if you're behind him, sometimes he can hit you with the tail without touching you. It's just really stupid. I have bad hitboxes like that. Again, just check out that video just to see how bad the hitboxes are. But how I approach U3 is I just damage his weak spots using the regular combat knife. This is why I saved up on a lot of durability. It's for this stupid encounter. And you'll also want to make sure you have a couple of boot knives in your inventory. You do not want to lose out on a very crucial knife in this encounter. You instead want to reserve those boot knives for the knife executions so that you still have durability left over for this guy. Like, the amount of durability you have with a level 1 knife, it's actually enough to trigger both of the stuns, and then you can just finish off U3 with 1 boot knife if you have, like, a full durability on your boot knife to do both knife executions, or if not, you can just have, like, 2 boot knives to do both of the knife executions. But while you're doing this, he's just doing all these really stupid moves. This move right here, he'll just go around the arena. You gotta stay on the edge of the arena to avoid these pustules right over here. But I'm just waiting for an opening to get back into the middle, and he can resurface rather quickly. It's very random how long it takes for this guy to resurface. Sometimes it can be even longer than this, like his AI is bugged out. It doesn't make sense. But this charge attack right here, he always does the charge attack after he roars. The only exception is when he's summoning enemies, after enough damage has been dealt to the worm. But the way you avoid that charge attack is really stupid. It has some really stupid tracking on it, but you have to run at a 45-degree angle to the left. That's the only way to avoid it. And right here, he decided to spawn right next to me, which is stupid. So whenever the worm spawns right next to you, you've got to get behind him, because most likely it's going to do a melee attack that's impossible to avoid unless you're behind it or you're far away from it. And if he spawns right next to you, there's no way you're going to rely upon the latter option of just getting as far away from this worm as possible. It's not possible in the slightest if it spawns right next to you. But there's the charge attack again. Every time this worm does the charge attack and it bounces off the wall, it will be stunned for a bit, and you can knife the tail. And then after that, you need to get back into the center of the arena. There's the QTE. I avoid it. You might get those situations where the worm will just emerge from the ground and not do anything, and the way he goes back into the ground looks slightly different to the way he normally gets back into the ground after an attack. If that happens, it always means he is going to do a QTE attack afterwards. That's an important thing to know. That's why there are those times where I'm able to know exactly when the QTE comes, and I just spam the dodge button like crazy. He's spawned right there. He's doing the roar now. You might also notice there's a very subtle difference between the way he roars when he does the charge attack and when he roars to summon enemies. So after an attack, he'll normally emerge from the ground very quickly, and then after he's fully emerged, he initiates the roar pretty quickly. That normally means he is going to summon the enemies. If it takes him slightly longer to initiate the roar after he comes out of the ground, it means he's always going to do the charge. And also, by the way, whenever you're in the second phase of this worm encounter after you deal the first knife execution, there are times where this worm, after it does the acid attack, it will initiate a charge attack, and it will just charge right at you, and so you have to avoid it by running at a 45-degree angle to the left. It comes out of nowhere. I don't really know how to predict when that happens, but it's pretty dumb that that is the case. But it's still going on. I'm trying to save on as much ammunition as I can because I need all this ammunition for Sadler, and it just takes too long. And I'm guessing this is meant to be New Capcom's apology for the fact that they didn't put in the Gravedigger in Resident Evil 3 Remilk. I'm guessing that's what this is, because what else could this possibly be? Like, this is just so absurd for the sake of being absurd. Like, I could understand this with the Gravedigger in Resident Evil 3 Remilk. I mean, the acid move, obviously, that wouldn't be there, but this has to be what this is. I mean, why else would they choose this? It makes more sense that way than whatever other reason you want to give as to why they designed the second phase the way it was. And for it to have this much life, it's like two separate encounters rather than two separate phases. I mean, why does it have this much life? And I know I'm using the knife, and I could probably be using my other weapons, but again, I need to save up on all this ammunition for Sadler. And even when I'm using my sniper rifle, I mean, it might take slightly less time to kill this guy, but I'm still dealing with the same bullshit either way. And also, I should mention that Ether has already posted his no merchant attempt on Separate Ways Remilk, and I did miss out on a couple of flash grenades before the Garrador encounter. So there were actually like 3 or 2 flash grenades I missed in this recording. So I could have had a lot more flash grenades for the Garrador encounter, but it still wouldn't change what that encounter is. And also, whenever Ether was dealing with the acid attack, in this worm phase, he always used the TMP and just fired into its mouth to limit the amount of pustules that would come out. Too bad there's nothing more creative that New Capcom could have done. Like, why can't you detonate the pustules inside its mouth and it does something? Or do something a lot more interesting with a unique kind of mechanic? And speaking of unique mechanics, remember how in the original version of Separate Ways, how you could parry Sadler with your shotgun by shooting him before his attack connected with you at the right moment? Nothing like that exists for Sadler in Resident Evil 4 Remilk and Separate Ways Remilk. Nothing like that exists at all. There's no creativity. It's just pump everything you have into Sadler, and that's it. It's so, like, unimaginative, uninspired, so bare bones and so basic, so rudimentary in the thought processes that went into Sadler. And I predicted perfectly that they were going to ruin Sadler greatly in Resident Evil 4 Remilk and not favor any sense of creativity or common sense at all. And Sadler is just so unintimidating in this Remilk. In the main experience, we barely got any kind of interaction with him, and every time we did get an interaction with him, he would always be preaching or just chanting or saying all these really dumb lines that just really make him feel like a cheesy movie villain rather than some intimidating antagonist. At least they made him feel intimidating in Resident Evil 4 OG, and also the actual fight with him in Separate Ways OG was actually intimidating with the music. I mean, this is the first time we're ever fighting Sadler in his human form, and then when he has the speed boost, when he's using his tentacles, when he has the music playing, I mean, it all contributes to a survival horror encounter, and then when you discover that you can parry Sadler, it becomes a more interesting engagement, and it's just a shame that parrying Sadler and doing the QTE to stab his eyeball does less damage than actually getting him on a walkway that's inclined and then just looping his QTE moves, because he can't do his close range tentacle attack. He can only do his QTE moves for some reason. But just knifing him in general does more damage than doing the QTEs after you parry him. It just doesn't make sense that they would design it like that. That's the most noob way to deal with Sadler in Resident Evil 4 OG, just using the knife against him rather than using a very creative parry mechanic. There's so much more to Sadler in Resident Evil 4 OG in the Separate Ways DLC than here. And instead what we get is a damage spongy, broken encounter with some really shitty hitboxes. And the hitboxes are so bad. Like, you wanna know something really funny? There's a QTE move that Sadler does in Separate Ways Remilk, where he like does this drill move with his tentacles, and there's wind happening everywhere, right? And so, adhering to the principle of common sense, you'd obviously get out of the way of that move, right? Because he always does that move in the center of the arena. But when you favor the route of common sense, you just get hit for no reason. You get hit by nothing. You just get hit by some wind that he's generating. How the hell he generates that wind, I have no idea. Why it's so fantastical in its interpretation, I do not know. But you have to do the QTE. And do you know how long I spent on that encounter in my blind playthrough trying to understand how to avoid that move? And it turns out I have to actually stand in that path and hit the QTE to actually avoid that move for no reason. I can get hit by that move even when I'm behind cover for no reason. That just goes to show how retarded the developers were. I've never seen any development team use bad hitboxes and illogical sense to force you to do a QTE. I've never seen a developer force QTEs down your throat like that. Why do you make it where I can go off to the sides and get into cover and then get punished by a bad hitbox? Why do you design it like that when you're gonna make me do the QTE? Why do you not just have like some fixed camera view that locks onto Sadler and then you can do the QTE? Or better yet, just have me do the QTE even when I'm not in the path. That makes so much more sense. But you have to actually put yourself in danger and just stand in front of that move to do the QTE, and you always avoid that move. But they didn't bother conveying it in a way that made sense. So I spent so much of my blind playthrough just getting caught by that move, do the bad hitboxes, and then out of the blue, I'm just like, maybe I'm supposed to stand right near the walls that are in his path, because when I was going up those stairs and just standing in that general area, he would never continue his move all the way. And then I tried to do the same thing for the other side, and then that's when I saw the QTE, and I was just mind-boggled that that was what I was supposed to do. That is seriously the most retarded piece of crap I have ever seen, and that's probably not the most retarded piece of crap I've ever seen in Resident Evil 4 Remilk, but it's up there for sure. And right now, there's still about a minute left before I finally finish off this worm. Like, why does he have so much life to the point where I have to use my knife to ensure I have plenty of ammunition for Sadler? And I'm not even going to waste time using my sniper rifle. And I'm not even going to run the gambit with the possibility of getting back enough sniper rifle ammo for Sadler. That's precisely why I use my knife here. And right there, why did I not take damage? There are those really rare moments where for some reason, a pustule can detonate and you don't take any damage. It's almost like this worm, as well as the first phase of U3, can fire a pustule at another pustule and it detonates it, and then randomly you just take damage or not. It is so bizarre with its programming. Yeah, so many problems with U3. What an absolutely pathetic reimagining of U3. U3 was a lot of fun in Resident Evil 4 OG, and I think that's a bit of an exaggeration. He was pretty simple, but at least he was a lot more fun in the context of Resident Evil 4 OG, and using the knife and then baiting him to specific parts of the environment to actually hit him with the knife, and then using the incendiary grenades and the regular grenades against him. There was definitely some engagement to be had right there, and I did find his first phase to be pretty fun, just sidestepping his attacks and then knifing him during his recovery frames. At least there's designs there, like, at least there's designs I can rationalize with U3 in Resident Evil 4 OG. There are no designs that I can rationalize with Resident Evil 4 Remilk's interpretation of U3. And he is so unintimidating in Resident Evil 4 Remilk compared to Resident Evil 4 OG. Just his appearance in Resident Evil 4 OG, his eyes are crying out loud. Remember that first cutscene with U3 when he busts through the wall and you're in those corridors, and then he roars at you and you see his eyes? Those eyes were really creepy. And that whole corridor sequence, I have plenty of my subscribers telling me that that sequence was actually pretty intimidating for them. And I do agree with them that the idea of being in that kind of narrow sequence and then trying to navigate the environment and avoiding U3 when he jumps up top and he jumps down upon you and you're dealing with them, There's definitely a level of survival horror there, but there is no survival horror at all with the way they portrayed U3, or sorry, Pasanta in this Remilk. It's all just hallucinations, just really cliched, action-y stuff, and all this other garbage with bullet sponginess, really stupid attacks, just really buggy attacks, really broken hitboxes, all this other dumb stuff that just makes me not take Pasanta seriously. I just don't know what they were trying to achieve at all. Like, Ada being infected by the Plaga achieves absolutely nothing at all. And the fact that Ada is able to extract the Plaga from herself by just killing Pasanta doesn't make any sense. I get that the Plaga has a hive mind, but what specifically about Pasanta is so specific to allow her death to trigger some kind of apoptosis in the parasite that then causes the body to reject the parasite and it's just out. And apparently in a file it's mentioned that the parasite has some kind of specialized cells that don't allow it to survive outside of a host. Like, they take that kind of cheap route with providing some kind of fake lore with that. That kind of cheap shortcut in storytelling and inability to provide better details that are more refined as to how the mutations work is a huge case of Occam's razor, for sure. They could have written this DLC without Ada being infected, but they chose the most ridiculous route possible. And it's all so throwaway in the end, it really is. But I'm reaching the hour limit on my recording, so I'll be back for the next part. So this part right here, after we activate the Pounding Rocks, we're going to be dealing with a couple of enemies. You can lure most of the enemies back to the Pounding Rocks, and so that's why there's going to be a lot of edits in this part. If you're getting moments where the enemies are running, and they're oftentimes avoiding the Pounding Rocks, generally, if you aim at them, they will choose to walk instead of run if they're relatively close to you. So you can use that behavior to your advantage to make them stay under the Pounding Rocks, and then the Pounding Rocks can kill them. Yeah, it's all just pretty simple, boring stuff. There's going to be some more enemies right over here, so I'm just going to use the sniper rifle to dispatch the crossbow guys and any other enemies that are taking quite a while to get over to the Pounding Rocks. That guy, for some reason, takes 2 shots to the head. I don't know why this is always the case with the sniper rifle in Resident Evil 4 Remilk. I don't know why the damage is so limited where enemies can just survive that kind of shot. There wasn't a single moment in the original Resident... I mean, actually, no, there were moments in the original Resident Evil 4 where enemies could survive those kind of shots, but it was only with, like, the Militia Ganado, to my knowledge. And then in Resident Evil 5, I can't think of a single moment where the Majini ever survived a sniper rifle shot. Even with a level 1 sniper rifle, they died instantly because of how well designed that game is, and that actually has the right to be a game compared to this pre-alpha and this pre-alpha of a DLC. But I get rid of these guys. I don't know why sometimes the enemies immediately transform after you do some kind of suplex, or in this case, some kind of downward kick, but I don't know why there's this inconsistency with the enemies when they transform after those kind of attacks. I mean, most of the time, they'll open themselves up to being susceptible to a knife execution, but other times, they just immediately transform. I don't know why this inconsistency is apparent throughout Resident Evil 4 Remilk. But we have a couple more enemies. There's a chance to pick up some ammunition here. And I get the chance to craft some more sniper rifle rounds, because like I mentioned, I need at least 75 sniper rifle rounds, so I'm actually going to take on Sadler. And I just uploaded the Sadler video. It was almost like 20 minutes, guys. I mean, it was roughly like 18 minutes, actually, but at 20 minutes is a pretty good estimation. I mean, it's ridiculous that Sadler has that much life. And I just played Separate Ways OG before starting this recording. And Sadler is so different in Resident Evil 4 OG. Like, he's so good. And the whole parry system involved with Sadler in the Separate Ways DLC of Resident Evil 4 OG really gives that kind of push and pull motion, like perfectly timing your shots with the shotgun to get a really good stun on them and then follow up with a knife execution. That alone is a better design philosophy for a boss than with any of the bosses in Resident Evil 4 Remilk. And as I stated before, Resident Evil 4 Remilk has the worst bosses I have ever seen in the entire Resident Evil series. And I mean it, guys. You might think that Resident Evil 0 has the worst bosses, but I would not say that at all. Like, so what if, with the infected bat, you're fighting the controls more so than the actual boss, and the game is so rigidly designed that if you do not have 5 incendiary rounds, you won't be able to stand a chance against the bat. At least it can be done. and at least there is something involved with Resident Evil Zero that at least allows you to kill the bad very quickly and without being screwed by the bad gameplay designs, or like with the final boss of Resident Evil Zero with how damage spongy he is, the inconsistent AI, being unable to consistently distract him to make sure he doesn't go after Rebecca. I don't give a fuck about that. I don't really care at all that there are those poor designs right there. Just what they've done with the bosses overall in Resident Evil 4 Remilk with their poor designs and their bullet sponginess and with how soulless they all feel. That's infinitely worse than any boss in Resident Evil 0, that's for sure. Not even in Code Veronica with the final boss fight against Alexia. Not even that boss is as bad as any of the bosses in Resident Evil 4 Remilk. But we just ran past a bunch of these enemies right here. I had to lure them all down there because trying to get past them when they're on this catwalk is pretty annoying. And if you have flash grenades, you can stun them very easily, and you can easily get past them that way. But we're about to make our way over to the lab area from Chapter 13 of Resident Evil 4 Remilk, and there are a couple of enemies and regenerators blocking our way. There's one sequence in particular, which is in the kitchen area, where there's one regenerator and an Iron Maiden, and I do not know exactly what the developers expect you to do, but when I've watched Ether, I've just seen him use the biosensor scope on the sniper rifle and just dispatch the regenerators that way, but the fact that they put that regenerator and the Iron Maiden so close to each other in a claustrophobic environment, it really doesn't feel like that's the intended way they wanted you to handle that sequence. Just using your biosensor scope on the sniper rifle and dispatching the regenerators just feels very awkward and time-consuming with the way they've set up the scenario. It really doesn't make any sense to me, and so there are a lot of times where I try to run past the Iron Maiden or use flash grenades, but it's still prone to a lot of RNG, and there's no telling what kind of move the Iron Maiden does. And if the Iron Maiden does that AoE attack where he launches the spikes out of his body, there's no way you're going to get through without taking damage. You can parry it, but I think he does it twice in a row, and it can be very awkward trying to get the timing down. But also, another stupid thing is that they literally have the first regenerator standing around a corner for no reason. Like, why is this guy just standing around a corner? And I've tried luring him with noise. He doesn't respond to the noise whatsoever. Like, if it was complementary to that whole idea of stealthing the regenerators, then I could totally understand that. But it's not the case at all. Like, why would they put that regenerator around a corner? Like, that doesn't feel like it complements the idea of using your biosensor scope on the sniper rifle to dispatch the guys, and he's so close to the other Iron Maiden. I just don't understand what they intended you to do for that sequence, but I just make a mad dash past that Iron Maiden, and I get very fortunate that he did the right move, and I just move on. And you can go up with the hook shot and then go back down after the regenerator's leash and pick up the supplies, but it didn't matter so much because I already had plenty of supplies, and now we have the lift sequence that they completely reused from Resident Evil 4 OG, and this is so bizarre, guys, because the stun systems on the enemies are completely different. Even their HP is different. Like, these enemies will consistently flinch from every single shot from your bullets. Even the pistol makes them flinch. The submachine gun makes them flinch. The rifle makes them flinch. Every shot will consistently stun them. Why was this not the standard that they adhered to for all of Resident Evil 4 Remilk? Like, why did they have to favor the most awkward route possible with designing the fundamental gameplay? And then right here for this lift sequence, they decided to favor Resident Evil 4 OG's model of stuns, even though it's not exactly as good as Resident Evil 4 OG stuns. And also, without the semi-auto rifle that you can get from the merchant, this sequence can be very, very awkward and messy. Using the bolt-action sniper rifle just isn't good enough for this sequence because the enemies get very close to you before you even have a chance to deal with them. And so I tried to use a combination of the sniper rifle and the bowgun in order to dispatch the enemies, and it did pay off, but it still felt kind of awkward. And now we have this stupid sequence, so if you have flash grenades, just use them to run past the sequence. Flash grenades are pretty useless for the rest of this DLC, and you can get more back in the final chapter anyway. But you just gotta go from cover to cover. Just wait for a bit after the turrets have stopped firing to ensure that they do not immediately hone in on your position before you get to the next cover point. So right here, you can actually initiate the animation of going into the hookshot from here. And you do get iframes, but not near the end of this animation, I believe. And rather than waste time dealing with the enemies in this really time-consuming sequence that really dragged on longer than necessary in my blind playthrough, I'm instead going to make a mad dash through this entire sequence. And at least these 2 flash grenades were helpful for the rest of the sequence. But I used a flash grenade right over here to stop the enemies on the left. It didn't stun the enemies behind me though, so that was problematic. But luckily for me, that guy decided to stop because the sporadic nature on whether he chooses to sprint or not worked in my favor, which was very fortunate for me. And I'm going to run past these guys by taking a wide angle. There is a brute inside this tent right here, but I think he's always programmed to use the wrist-mounted launcher, and of course he's firing into a wall, so that's helpful. And now I'm going to be able to activate the turret and open the way out, and also block off the enemies. If you use your flash grenade earlier, before you actually get up here to activate the turret, you'll slow the enemies, and you'll pretty much block off all the enemies, and you won't have a couple of stragglers coming around that corner to come and get you. So that's a good tip that Ether showcased in his walkthrough. And also, Ether demonstrated that from where that turret was, you can actually shoot the guy that's manning this turret right over here. But I don't really recommend doing that, because I feel like it will cause the enemies to close in on you a lot quicker than usual, because you might be spending time trying to aim, and you might be getting screwed by the reticle, or there could be some ambiguous detection. Watch this for ambiguous detection, guys. I tried to shoot this barrel to get rid of the turret, and somehow I miss. I don't understand how that's possible. I'm pretty sure the bullet impact was on that explosive barrel, but the hit detection was kind of messing with me. And now we have this. So this is a fine example of a throwaway idea. Why the hell did new Capcom decide to introduce a new BOW that does not feel like a BOW induced by the Las Plagas, only to immediately kill him off? What is the point of this? This is so stupid, guys. This is what I mean when I say this DLC loves to introduce a lot of throwaway ideas for the sake of novelty rather than for anything else. And apparently this BOW is able to regenerate, and its regeneration is so different to the regenerators. What? Is it somehow different to the regenerators? Does it not use a leech plaga? Like, they don't even go into any details about that. They just simply say, oh, he's able to regenerate, and the only way to kill him is with the lasers. And this laser grid is nowhere near as interesting as the laser grid from Resident Evil 4 OG. Even the acrobatics that Ada displays, just the way the camera work is, just the way the motion graphics look. I'm not really feeling any sense of exertion on Ada's part when she's performing these acrobatics to dodge the lasers. And look at that. She says that was excessive. Are you serious? Just the way that laser grid was set up, you really think that was excessive? And she does more of these acrobatics right over here. I'm not really feeling anything, guys. And also, this is very strange, but Ada's going to jump off this wall on the left, and she's somehow going to pull out her hookshot very quickly, even though her hand was nowhere near where her hookshot was. So how on earth did Ada pull out her hookshot so quickly? That doesn't make any sense at all. And the way they made the scene look, it's almost as if Ada somehow predicted that there would be lasers that would encompass the entire room, so she had to use her hookshot. Just the way the scene played out when it was transitioning between the individual segments, it just didn't look right at all. Yeah, that is a pretty dumb sequence. And again, they just took a scenario from the original version of Resident Evil 4 and just hid it behind a paid DLC for some reason. Talk about awe-inspiring content right there. And if you need a disclaimer saying that right there was sarcasm, this video is definitely not for you. But I used some stealth to my advantage by hiding in the merchant's room and then using my gun to lure the enemies. And then I'm going to use the barrel to kill the crossbow guys and then try to take out that shield guy with knife execution, because again, the militia ganado have this unique characteristic where if you stay behind them after they recover from their recovery animation, you can get the knife execution prompt for a couple of seconds and be able to instantly kill them. I don't know why this doesn't apply to the village ganado or the zealots, but it just goes to show how screwed up the development was. And the fact that this was preserved in this DLC, yet the team that handled this DLC is completely different because the director is different, so most likely the programmers and the rest of the individuals who handled the story and the screenplay were likely different. That just seems so weird to me, but we have the opportunity to pick up a flash grenade. There are going to be a couple of enemies on the elevator who are going to come and attack you, and there's a really stupid piece of programming involved. So whenever the enemies are close to the elevator and you try to activate the button, you cannot activate the button. The pre-alpha will not let you for some stupid reason. And there are definitely some moments that I'm going to showcase in my poor designs of Separate Ways Remilk content where I'm nowhere near the enemies. I'm on the lift trying to activate it, yet this pre-alpha will not let me activate the elevator for some stupid reason. And this is during the time sequence where you have to get that special rocket launcher to Leon, and it's just fighting me all the way. It's so retarded. I cannot believe they would take that kind of design and just put it in this DLC. What were they thinking with that? If they struggled so much with actually scripting the elevator in such a way that it would not cause errors or cause the enemies to glitch out in some very weird way or crash the game or whatever, why would they design an elevator? That doesn't make any sense. They could have just designed a hookshot animation. I mean, what were they thinking with that? I don't get it, guys. But we have a couple more enemies right here. I think you can actually do the sequence stealthily, because I believe certain enemies were walking towards because they didn't quite know where I was. I'll have to test that out when I replay the sequence for my other Worstthroughs. But I get past these guys, I get past this guy right here, and there's going to be one more guy that just spawns out of the blue for some reason. A lot of arbitrary spawns like that in Resident Evil 4 Remilk. And we now get to Sadler. And I've sped up Sadler by about 2 times speed, but the fight is like 18 minutes, if you even want to call it a fight. What is there to say about Sadler, guys? This is the most monotonous, bullet-spongy, uninspired, uninteresting, uncreative final boss fight I have ever seen in the entire Resident Evil series, and I do not know which is worse. I do not know if Sadler from the main experience of Resident Evil 4 Remilk is worse than this so-called fight, but they are both standing on equal ground in terms of how pitiful their designs are. And Sadler in this pre-alpha has a lot of bad hitboxes that I've already demonstrated in my blind playthrough and also in my bad hitbox video. But just to talk about the general method, just keep your distance from Sadler, because the only time you're ever going to get an opening to hit Sadler is if he jumps at you from a distance, and then you just need to run around him. And the first time he jumps at you, he will not immediately attack you, and that can definitely throw off the pattern. But the other times when he decides to jump at you, he will immediately initiate an attack, and you have to run around him in a counterclockwise manner by going to the right. And I'm only going to shoot Sadler in the head, and you can also shoot Sadler's weak spot whenever he does his acid attack and you crouch under it, but the damage is so minuscule, I don't even know if it matters whether or not you hit that weak spot or not. But the rest of his attacks are also so badly designed. A lot of them have phantom range, and a lot of the times Sadler's AI can be really stupid, because a lot of the times he'll jump towards you and not do anything, or you do that QTE where he does that jump attack and then you dodge, but sometimes your position after you do the QTE, which is that roll animation you just saw, sometimes you can be so close to Sadler that he will just hit you with his back attack, and the back attack has some ridiculous tracking on it, and it also has phantom range. You pretty much have to parry it, but most likely you'll be chancing it by just running away from it. But that's another bad spot right there. So a lot of the times when you do the roll, you collide with Sadler and can be put so close to him that he will most likely hit you or do a really douchey attack. And because of the fact that the parry is not omnidirectional, if you're facing Sadler incorrectly, the parry doesn't register and you get fucked so hard by him. It is really broken. And also that move right there where he plunges his tentacle into the ground, that move, for some reason, has a broken startup frame period, because the active frame period of that move actually extends a bit into the startup frames, yet you do not take any damage, and it has phantom range as well. So what can happen is Sadler plunges his tentacle into the ground, and if you're close to him, sometimes you get stunned for no reason, and then you can't avoid the tentacle that comes up from under the ground. It's so broken. It's the same problem that occurs with U3, and U3 does the same kind of attack, where U3 plunges her tail into the ground, and it just comes up from underneath you. Like, a lot of Sadler's moves just feel like U3's moves, just reused in this encounter. They literally feel no different to each other in terms of some of their moves. That's how uninspired Sadler is even more, when he's reusing moves from U3. Like, it's the most standard generic fight I have ever seen, if you even want to call it that, because again, this is almost like a 20-minute encounter. Like, this doesn't feel practical at all for playing it normally. It's almost like the developers expect you to sell everything except for, like, the sniper rifle and the TMP and a couple of flash grenades. And then buy the rocket launcher to get rid of this guy, because that just feels so much more practical, and it feels like it has a lot more sense to it than doing whatever the hell I'm doing right now with this very weird loop of just staying as far as I can from Sadler and just hoping he doesn't catch me out with some really douchey attacks, or I don't get screwed by the really bad roll animation from the QTE or anything like that. There's just so much here that is wrong with Sadler, and also, I don't even know if it's worth going for the knife executions. I was really hoping that there would be something similar to the worm that U3 uses, where after like 2 knife executions, he instantly dies, but it's not the case at all. However, you do get some kind of special cutscene that plays when you finish off Sadler with a knife execution, but it's after like 3 knife executions, and it is so ambiguous whether or not Sadler is actually going to get stunned in such a way where he's susceptible to a knife execution. And here it is, his douchey move, where he holds his tentacles up like they're drills and just barrels his way towards you. And if you think about hiding behind the columns or going off to the side, you get fucked, because the hitbox on this move doesn't make any sense. Why the hell would the wind damage you or even hit you through cover? I mean, the nonsensical interpretation of this move, and they want you to use the QTE. Like, anyone in their right mind would just think of getting out of the way of this move, not stand in the middle like this and just wait for a QTE that they likely don't know about on their first playthrough. What were they thinking when designing that? And it's almost about as confusing as in the Shed as a Rose DLC, where during the final boss fight against Miranda, if you do not have your tooltips on, you don't even know that Rose has gained access to new moves. I always play with tooltips on, so I never came across this issue, but I remember so many people getting so confused and frustrated with Miranda when they didn't have their tooltips on because they didn't know Rose had gained access to new abilities. And so all the moves that required you to dodge Miranda's attacks, or you could actually like absorb her projectiles and then use the Mega Mycete attack, they were not aware of that at all because they did not have their tooltips on. What a massive blunder on New Capcom's part. But this feels like a bigger blunder, honestly, because this is the worst possible way you would ever want to encourage people to do the QTE, because the way it's handled, where you have to stand in the middle of this path and do the QTE rather than actually have the QTE active at all times, even when you're off to the side. Like, how could they mishandle that? It's just so nonsensical and so stupid and so amateurish for them to just immediately assume that the average individual is going to stand in the middle of the arena and just do the QTE. And it makes it even more confusing when you have that staircase right there, and you go up that staircase and just hide right there, and Sadler just stops before he even gets to the staircase. So you assume that this move is only able to be avoided when you're on that side, and so you get it ingrained into your head that if you're on this side where I'm at, you're just not going to be able to avoid that move, and that is just so bad in terms of messaging. And also, you see that debris right there, right by that wall at the very end? Right where Sadler is, I think if you stand by that debris, Sadler is more inclined to do his long-range attacks, which is what you need, because his close-range attacks, unless you're standing in the correct spot to get around him correctly, or he's actually in a position where he's not going to immediately follow up with another close-range attack if you get around it correctly, they're almost impossible to avoid unless you parry, and you might as well parry him because the knife just doesn't have any other utility here, and the knife executions just don't feel like they do anything at all. So that's probably what the developers are expecting you to do, but what if you don't have a knife? What the hell do you do then? And with how long this encounter takes just trying to do it normally, or in this case without the merchant. I don't even know how long it takes with an upgraded sniper rifle, but why would you ever want to invest in weapon upgrades when you can just buy the rocket launcher and end the fight immediately? That just feels like the route the developers expect you to favor when you're doing this encounter. Just buy the rocket launcher and end the fight. And it won't even matter if you don't have weapon upgrades for the final encounter where you get the special rocket launcher, because you'll be spending more time running past the enemies and just using the explosives. And then when you get to the Visitors, they die very quickly from the TMP and the sniper rifle, and then the other enemies at a distance, they die instantly from headshots with the sniper rifle, and then you likely have flash grenades with you. So obviously, that just gives more validation to the idea that they don't want you to simply slot into weapon upgrades. They just want you to buy the rocket launcher. That just feels like the more practical route. So everything I am listing right here is all just confused mentalities with what they have done with Sadler. Everything here is just mixed messaging, and it only contributes to how confused the developers were when designing Sadler. There is no imagination here. There's nothing interesting you can do with shooting him before his attack connects with you, and he goes into a stun animation that exposes his weak spot, and then you can follow up with a really powerful knife execution. Nothing like that at all. It's just the same, oh, just shoot his weak spot when it exposes and get pitiful damage, just avoid his moves accordingly, try to keep your distance to avoid his stupid hitboxes and other bad attacks, because his close-range attacks are pretty stupid. His long-range attacks aren't so bad, aside from the phantom range. This is literally the same kind of boss mentality that was applied to the El Gigante in Resident Evil 4 Remilk, to Bitores Mendez, even though Bitores Mendez was a better boss, but he still had some pretty bad designs, and his portrayal was just really stupid. And then you have Vertigo, which was pretty much the same case, although you're just relying upon avoiding him rather than actually dealing with him. And then you have Salazar, which is just use golden eggs to avoid his poor designs entirely, because they had no idea what they were doing with Salazar, and so they made the designs so bad to force you to rely upon the golden eggs, just use an Easter egg to bypass what should have been a well-designed encounter. Instead, you're bypassing a badly designed encounter. And then you have Krauser. Krauser is literally a similar kind of boss with similar mentalities that drags on for far too long. Avoid his moves accordingly, try not to get screwed by his bad hitboxes, and the forceful parry system, the same kind of mentalities that went into Sadler in this Remilk. And then the Sadler boss fight at the end of Resident Evil 4 Remilk when you're fighting him as Leon. There are so many conflicting mentalities at play. The environment just doesn't feel complementary to Sadler whatsoever, and trying to just deal with him normally feels so weird. And the arena and the Novisador supporting him just add more awkward gameplay into the mix with Sadler, and so you're just relying upon looping his jump attack, or if you're trying to do it normally, you're just baiting out one attack and then damage racing him with the assault rifle so that you can damage race his weak spots and just end him very quickly. Then you have the first encounter with Basanta in this DLC. That's literally a damage race. It's nothing extraordinary whatsoever. You have to damage race, otherwise you'll get screwed. Then you have Basanta 2 with those hallucinations. Yet again, another example of damage racing. Like, you really need an upgraded TMP to deal with the moves, and you're still avoiding the same moves, dealing with the same bad hitboxes, and dealing with really stupid hallucinations that don't add anything aside from more confusion and fantastical elements to the Plaga that are so unnecessary. Then you have the El Gigante that doesn't feel like a fight. He's in slow motion constantly. His moves have some really ambiguous detection with them, and then he has enemies supporting him for no reason. Like, what the hell do they add? And then you're jumping on the roof and just stun locking him with your grenades, just doing really boring stuff, just doing really dumb stuff like that to ensure the fight is balanced. If you even want to call it a fight, it just doesn't feel like the fight was finished anyway. And then you have U3, which is also another unfinished encounter. It has so much life, and two phases that feel like two separate encounters. Both of them have an absurd amount of life. Both of them have bad hitboxes, all sorts of dumb attacks, just avoiding their moves accordingly. Just the same generic mindset. And then you have Sadler, the same generic mindset that I've already just explained. There is nothing diversifying the bosses whatsoever. There's nothing methodical about them. There's nothing unique about their identities. They're just the same. They're the same, and they're equally as mundane and as bad. Although U3 and Sadler are worse because they have way more life, and they have a lot more opportunities to screw the player over with their dumb designs and the like. I mean, this is literally the most uninspired boss design I have ever seen in a Resident Evil title by far. And the only thing that really gives them any sense of identity, or actually no, it doesn't give them any sense of identity with their bad hitboxes, because they all have the same problems with their hitboxes and other stupid designs like that. I mean, it's just so uniform in quality between all of these bosses. And the uniform aspect they favor has to do with poor designs, repetitive, mundane, tiresome gameplay, and uninspired ideas. And improperly thought out scenarios, governed by a very improper mindset. That's literally what we're getting in Resident Evil 4 Remilk and the Separate Ways Remilk, only it feels worse in Separate Ways Remilk. But that's not really saying much, because the difference in boss quality between Resident Evil 4 Remilk and Separate Ways Remilk is pretty minuscule at best. And speaking of dumb designs, we now have this stupid section. Any sense of rushing through the sequence, any sense of urgency, any sense of trying to get the special rocket launcher to Leon as fast as possible is completely lost, because this is such a slow sequence. Somehow, this sequence in Separate Ways OG, even though that sequence didn't have a timer, it feels like there's a greater sense of urgency and actually rushing through like crazy to get that special rocket launcher to Leon, compared to this sequence that actually has a timer. You just cannot rush through the sequence and actually contribute to any sense of fast-paced gameplay, because if you do, you're going to get screwed, and there are also some bad designs at play, like what I've already described with that elevator problem, where even though there weren't any enemies nearby, I could not get up the elevator. But then you have to slow down and destroy these tentacles. Like, really? That's how you want to encourage a sense of urgency? Just taking your time trying to get rid of these tentacles that block your path, and then you have all these enemies spawning out of nowhere, and slowing the gameplay down, and the like. I mean, this is just so bad with its pacing. It was just as bad in my blind playthrough, and it's just as bad here. Even watching this again, I can already feel pacing issues with this entire stupid sequence. It's all an illusion. The timer is an illusion. They gave you plenty of time to do this, and then the enemies are set up in such a way that you have to approach it like every other sequence. Just take it nice and slowly and just dispatch the enemies one at a time, or just try to rush through it as best as possible, or just like lure enemies away and then just use your hook shot when possible in order to knock away enemies and just get rid of explosives and all this other stuff. Use flash grenades when you can, and then just take your time getting rid of enemies and destroying these tentacles. It definitely feels like the developers didn't know what they wanted to do with the sequence, and it's only given more validation by the fact that you're able to read a file when you get the special rocket launcher that details how Krauser got the special rocket launcher. Like, we really needed to know that during a sequence where there's supposed to be a sense of urgency because a timer is counting down. And also, why does Krauser never use this special rocket launcher against Leon at any point in his boss fight, or at any other point in Resident Evil 4 Remilk? It doesn't make any sense. This is such a badly done sequence. What a terrible way to end this pre-alpha, but it wouldn't have mattered because every part of this DLC is atrocious. And I'm gonna have a field day talking about this DLC even more in my next Worstthroughs and also in my retrospective. But that is the end of this DLC. Stay tuned for future content. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.